Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to my is the seventh session of the Forefront Residency. Yeah, second to last session, I think it's the seventh. Really happy to have you guys here with us. And thank you again for following along this creative journey. Um, Today we're gonna do kind of a hybrid session. So half of it, we're gonna continue on some of the technical deep dive as the ones that we've been doing with Unity and possibly some other software. And on second half of it, we're gonna be talking about some some greater concepts, future plans for this game. As you all know that the plan for Agartha is not just this residency. This residency is kind of like I see it as the incubator for the Agartha project, but the project itself is gonna be a lot bigger and a lot more of a longer stretch than the residency. Even though I do think that we achieved a lot throughout the residency. So thank you again for the Forefront family for supporting me throughout this journey. And so with that being said, we are gonna get started with our session today by doing some technical dive and also more of a conceptual thinking into game development and UI design. Um, so with that being said, I am gonna start by sharing my screen. Let's see. Share. And okay, the entire screen. So, oh, now here we go. So, hi. So, yeah, I have a lot of programs open. I really hope everything works fine. So, as you might know, not last time what we did was that we were able to kind of give each of the soil an amount and like a soil information prototype. So if I go and select any of these, I'm gonna zoom in first. So if I go and select any of these soil samples, which I believe I put right here, but I forgot where they are. Yeah, so if I select any of these soil samples, there's a script attached to it that gives it a name and give it an amount of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. These are like the three elements that in permaculture and also in agriculture that most plants need, and each plant have like a different proportion of the NPK ratio, which is nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And each different soil sample will give you different ratio of these NPK. So when you translate that into the technical side, into like a simulation, what we plan to do is that each of these soil would have like X amount of NPK, based on the local terrain. But as of right now, for the sake of the demo, we're just gonna randomize it. And has needs of its NPK, and then you can kind of just kind of like think about it as a puzzle game. So you fit different plants with different needs into like one area to make sure that they all grow good. So that's the plan that we have. Want to share with you a bit on where our progress is. So as I was making this, as we mentioned it last time, in the beginning of this game, I was very much like thinking in a very ambitious way. We're like thinking about, okay, like what are everything that we need. So going back to the chart here, what I thought as I was constructing on like the backend and the engineering infrastructure of this game, I started by thinking about reading about biome. So biome is actually a really cool concept, and basically you can kind of give two parameters. You can consider them as variables, and then by a different combination of these parameters, you will be able to generate an infinite amount of terrain. So parameters including wet and dry, hot and cold. And the most dry and cold places would be like tundra, in the polar region where there's, and then the most wet and cold places, which is also tundra, I guess, but more wetter tundra. But then if you bring the scale down on the hot and cold spectrum, for example, if it's like medium hot but extremely dry, you get like kind of deserty ish of places, but maybe still some plants. But if it's extremely hot and wet, then you kind of get these rainforesty kind of places where things are just a lot easier to grow. So this is what I started thinking about. And in terms of this game, I'm thinking that maybe oh, we can kind of just like make a little bit of a biome generator, which would be kind of fun. And you can like tweak the hot and cold and wet and dry parameter and then just generate different kind of terrain. And then once you have this terrain, which is kind of can be a tool to simulate like realistic planting scenarios, because like we don't really want people to just build eco villages in beautiful forests, which is like people already do that already. So like one of the biggest eco-village movement you can find is either in places like Portugal or Costa Rica or the Caribbean or South America, and there's a lot more eco-villages in places like Costa Rica than there are places of Russia, I think, because the climate is just so much easier to grow, and it's very intuitive. It's very easy for people to get started on permaculture and growing things in places with just like naturally really rich soil. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't figure out how to grow things in places that's more severe, and also like learn from the environment and adapt to it and see what additional things that we want to build. So like I as I was thinking the beginning of this game should be like understanding the environment, really understand how it works, and then implementing or like supplementing the environment by planting things in accordance to how the environment works. And at some point I realized, okay, like I do not have time to finish this within the forefront residency. There's no way. If I just spend a lot of time on this, then in the end all we will see is just a bunch of form and data and like strings. There won't be like really fun interactions anytime soon. So that's why I spent a lot of time thinking about like just the greater scope of the game, and and then realized that okay, like we don't really have time to visualize any of these for the audience. And I do think that it's really valuable for the audience to see something in a more visual form by the end of the residency, because it's more engaging and it's also like paints a picture of like what we're trying to convey. So in the end, the approach was just to use it as kind of a hackathon prototype project. But I still think that it's worth to talk about these concepts, because these are what we intend to do eventually. Like, I don't intend to just stop working on this, because I've been working on this concept for a long time, and I do intend to continue working on it after the residency. So right now we're just gonna go over kind of like what's the bigger plan after this game, and then dive into what have we achieved with the game. So the first step thinking about it is to get the terrain and environment generator. And then after you have the terrain and environment generator, you get into kind of like what this is called, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So like what are some of the things that human needs to survive? Because in the end, we are creating an environment, a great environment for nature, but also like for humans to live. We're not saying, hey, let's just kill all the humans so that nature can have fun. I mean, there's like environmentalists that do that. I remember there was this meme that said that if you just like stop having children, that's the ultimate way to save the environment, which not saying that they're wrong, but that's beyond the point of this game. Our goal here is not only to celebrate environment and understand them, but also make sure how do we create like a positive win-win situation for both the human species and the environment, so that we can live in harmony with the environment and still at harmony with ourselves. So so after we figure out, like hypothetically one day, not hypothetically, one day we will figure out how to generate biome in like a game engine such as Unity. The next step is to think about what are some of the things that human needs to live in this biome, and then that comes with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then when we break that into elements, we can break that into elements such as these four. So water, sun, electricity, temperature, and food. I'm just gonna add food right here because it's essentials. So we need water. We need water to drink, and also water and food is kind of like just survival elements, right? If you think about it in a survival situation, we don't really need a laptop to survive. Like we'll be fine. People have done that through thousands of years, but things like sun, things like water and food, it's definitely like we need on a biological level. And so when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, the first layer is physiological needs, so such as food, water, warmth, and rest. So we need places to rest, which means that we need certain amount of shelter, and we need temperature control, which could be very, very important when it comes to places at extreme weather. So that with like the need for energy. So when we have fans, when we have ACs, it allow us to be a lot more productive in really extreme hot climates. And alongside with like things like fridges and things like oven, for us to better preserve our food and then serve us up better. So all of these need the fundamental level of physiological needs can be broken down into elemental objects in a game. So if you think about a game as an object-oriented simulation, everything is considered an object. Water is considered an object, sun is considered an object, electricity, amount of energy you get is object. The temperature, you can kind of consider that as an environment object. So once we break down these elements, we can kind of think about what are these elements, like how much of these elements do we need as human? Like how much power do we estimate need? Um, and then the situation definitely differs based on the environment. So you have like an environment in like kind of perfect comfort. Let's say Oakland, California, the weather is really nice. You don't really need have that much AC. But if you go to, I guess, like Shanghai in this weather, you definitely need AC. Otherwise, you might just have a heat stroke on the street. So or if you go to Austin during the summer. So like it also differs based on the type of climate. It also differs based on how you build your buildings, right? Some buildings are naturally, like if you go to Santa Fe or Taos, places in New Mexico, you see how native people of the American land build their shelter, and then they use these cob kind of building structure, and it's naturally really, really cool, even in extremely hot summer times, and it's warm in winter time. So using that, comparing that with like something built of like a container box or something built of like a regular wooden cabin, the amount of energy that you keep is going to be different. And Earthship have done like a great study into like how best build your house to conserve energy. So all of these are like things that we need to be taken consider into, but we can slowly formulate that in a game, but definitely not within the time of a month. So we're just gonna put some of the stuff that we talked about over here as we go through these like thinking process. I'm gonna be just adding things to this graph. So this is also like a process of the game development. This is before anything visual is done, but this is kind of like all the structure that's in the back supporting these visuals, and hopefully one day we'll be able to visualize them so that people can actually see the result. So when we break these physical needs, we think about like this is like the first level of elements needs, and when we kind of like translate that to the second layer of needs, electricity, we can think about electricity will provide temperature control, and will provide cooking, food preservation, and also level of entertainment. So for example, entertainment, we can, if we think about entertainment also as a physical need, or like a or like personal need, we can go back to this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So basically in this framework, after we have our basic needs from like food, water to security, safety, we also have psychological needs such as like prestige, a feeling of accomplishment, intimate relationships, friends, and then self-fulfillment needs and achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. So like as we go up, like as we have all the physical needs fulfilled, maybe we need to also think about like things that's beyond physical need, because we don't want to just survive, right? We want to be able to enjoy and actually have like really pleasant things and be creative and do all this fun stuff. And a lot of times creativity also would need energy intake, even though that's not always a thing, because like you can feel creative with zero energy, with just a pen and paper, and then going to the forest. You can feel creative just playing a string on a wooden instrument. So that's not always like a direct relations, but having these having energy, having technology does, like, they are able to help us fulfill our needs into a different level. So when you take that into illustration or art, right? Before the emergence of technology, we can only really draw on massive papers or smaller papers. Now we have iPads, now we have drawing pads, now we have Illustrator, now we have all these programs, we have generative software that people can use and just like go really crazy and bring their iteration to the next level. Same with music. Now we have all these new softwares that you can, these modern synths that you can create alien looking sounds, and then combine that with the traditional instruments. So the amount of electricity, like we do need to think about, if we're doing like a simulation kind of game, what are some of the things that people could need to fulfill like mental fulfillment. So I'm gonna also just write that down. We have physiological needs. So these are kind of the needs of like humans, right? So I can use a different color. Physiological needs, such as the elements and the I would say like the water element is kind of like a physiological need, sun and stuff, temperature and food, all of these. Electricity can go into physiological need, but okay, this is like a sub commentary on the onto the electricity thing. Gonna just change the font size to really small. Okay, and this is gonna put it right here as a comment, and change the color here, and physiological need, and what other and then we have like emotional needs. Again, because we're creating a game, we're not really like using this to say, hey, this is exactly how nature works, because like, as I've criticized before in previous sessions, we don't really want to rely too much on a reductionist model to use this and as a like very authority point of reference, be like, this is exactly how things work, because there's no way that we can get to simulate the eco-village or even simulate our environment 100%, because there's so many factors that we're not going to put into the simulation. So this is very much a reductionist kind of model, but only used as an educational kind of educational reference. So I'm gonna just very simply simplify the needs of humans over here, even though our needs are like much more complex than that. But over here, we're gonna simplify it to physiological need, emotional needs, and I would say like spiritual, but like creative or creative. So like this, I would connect this with more like things that you do for fun and things that you do to like really fulfill your ambition. So let's say like if you're creative, like what are some of the things that you do that like makes you feel really satisfied, gives you that dopamine kick when you like create that piece of painting or you create that piece of song. But also if you're a technical person, like what are some of the like some piece of program that you finish and then that enable a bigger company's product to work better, that gives you that creative like kick, and you're like, yes, I accomplished things. So like we can say this as accomplishment need, but I think accomplishment sounds like a bit more aggressive than spiritual and creative needs. So I'm just gonna use these. And then also if you're like doing any field of work that you're doing, really like any sort of work, whether you are doing like human resources, project management, or any of these things, I'm sure there will, like, the whole reason that we choose to do what we do is because there are certain things about that fulfills us, right? Like a football player wouldn't really want to be like a human resource manager, at least like most of the time, because they just like get these kicks, these satisfaction from different aspects. So, but in this game, we're gonna kind of just summarize them into these three parts. So these are like the elements that's derived from these human needs. So I am gonna, I'm gonna write these down. Elements, human needs. And once we can map out human needs and then the amount of element, we can use this to derive, okay, so these are what we need to survive, and these are the elements that need to support us. And then we can kind of like derive from the climate. So these are, these are what we have inside the climate with these natural resources that can provide these elements that fulfill our needs, right? And so that's kind of like the essence of this game that we're trying to derive here. Let me just make more space. And okay, also let me see if there's any comment. So nature can have fun. Nature's like, we have our needs, forget Maslow. I know, right? Why is there no Maslow hierarchy of needs for nature? So a bit of a sidetrack. I did find this kind of worth to bring up as I was googling for to put together this plant encyclopedia, which is gonna be put into this game for us to kind of like know the elemental properties of plants as we plant. And I found it so hard to search for the amount of things each plant need. If you do like a Google search, like plant, okay, lettuce needs nutrition needs for lettuce, growing lettuce, you will find a lot of guide that's fertilizer. So it's like a very commercial way to understand how to grow lettuce. Like, oh yeah, if you want to grow lettuce, this brand of fertilizer you need. And then you have some of the website that will tell you these are the essential nutrients for healthy food that lettuce need. And then it will say, oh, there's nitrogen, and then recommended amount approximately 5. But what does this 5 even mean? Like how much is that in like micrograms inside each patch of soil, or like what's the actual quantity that each lettuce needs and to grow? And those are just kind of like hidden somewhere on the internet. At least it's not as easily and readily available. But if you search for things like lettuce can provide nutrients from lettuce, I can almost guarantee that you can find exactly how much there is. So like 10 something something, 1 gram protein, 0 gram fat, 2 grams carbohydrate. It's like very precise because we know exactly what we can get out from this plant. And then as I was searching for that, I was kind of just like feeling a bit sad. I was like, okay, like we know exactly what they can provide us, but how come we're not really providing the knowledge or democratizing the knowledge of how, like, what do they need, like what are the exact amount they need, and why is that information so hard to find? Why isn't there an encyclopedia that just tells us what's on average each lettuce would need to grow their fulfilled life? Like how come we only care about us species and not the plants? But that's just like me over analyzing a bit. And but that's the whole reason that we wanted to work on this game, because we want to bring more awareness into us understanding nature instead of the other way around, right? Instead of like building a sim city where it's just for people, we're building a simulation for people and nature. So in the end, each of these natural elements, they all, like we're gonna map out human needs and how these elements needs are gonna like fulfill the human needs. And we're also gonna map out like plant needs, right? So like each of these plants, oh, actually I already have it here. So each of these plants, each of these plants have input and output, which input is basically their needs, and output is just like what they provide. And then later on, we can kind of also combine this elemental graph into what plant needs here. And then also use, okay, this climate types. I'm gonna put this somewhere else, somewhere here. This is the climate, and the output can go back to supporting the human, and also can go back to supporting the plant, supporting this. So wait, wrong arrow. Can go back to, oh yeah, I'll go back to support, I guess, the climate this way. So yeah, this is just us getting started mapping things out. The graph is gonna get a lot bigger and more complex as we proceed. But going back to what we wanted to finish but haven't yet, let me just make this slightly more readable. Okay. So put this right next to electricity. Okay. So emotional needs actually comes from, I think a lot of it comes from like having a community around us. So like having the kind of people that we want to be surrounded with. And we're not gonna delve too much into like the intricacy of human emotions in this game, because that's another game that, and then I don't even know if that can actually be rationalized, because emotion itself a lot of times is just completely irrational. You can't really be like, this is the amount of dopamine you take, and then you'll be happy forever. No, that's not exactly how it works. So emotional needs and spiritual creative needs are like beyond the point of this game, but we do want to very simply address it by like at least making sure that there are like amount of calculations that we can do to fulfill these. So as you all might know, in SimCity, each of, or not SimCity, actually in Sims, each of your character have like their happiness index, and then there's a certain amount of things that you can let them do to make them happier. So like things like painting, like that they take joys from, and things like relaxing and resting and eating and also having a partner and socializing is gonna really progress on their emotional needs. So a lot of times, so we're just gonna kind of use that model over here just so that we at least take these things in accountable. So emotional needs, we can kind of say it as like community, right? And then the whole point that we want to advocate eco-village, the whole point that we want to really like promote this ideology of eco-living is that in not only in eco-village you get to live in like in harmony with nature, where the lifestyle is like naturally regenerative, but also we want to promote the idea of an emotionally regenerative lifestyle where you can always live in a community where of people kind of helping each other out and taking care of each other, right? Instead of you yourself living in like a single city apartment, we can choose to be inside these communities where we take care of each other. So I think in a sense, maybe the community aspect of eco village is gonna be fulfilling the emotional needs of the majority of us. Although maybe you end up in the wrong village, maybe you just end up hanging out with a lot of assholes. But we are not gonna map out the index and amount of assholeness of people in this game. At least not in this game. That's an idea for another game. And spiritual creative needs, we can say that it can also be related to community. And also, I think another big part is like the amount of freedom, so free time. So then once we bring free time to the table, we will also realize that time itself is also an index that's worth to be addressed, right? So like each human, if we kind of like think about how we provided these plans as needs, so with input and what it provides as its output, we can really also do the same thing for human. And also like shout out to who said that? Someone said that earlier. Close this. Someone said that earlier. Nature's like, yeah, blockchain Lugano. So nature's like we have our needs. So totally, maybe we definitely should have this mapped out here too, where the climate and the biome, we can also map it out as like input output. So like what are some of the input and what are some of the output. So these are like the output, but maybe we can also think about the climate having its input, like what are some of the things that we input to it. So like if you think about emissions, that's kind of the input that we give to the climate, right? Like we can't really say climate likes or does not like CO2. We can just say we definitely don't like too many CO2 because we suffocate, but in terms of climate, I don't think it's amount of good and bad. I think the measurement of climate being good or bad is completely dependent on us. So over here we can kind of draw like another graph over, so to say that hey, human needs is actually like reflects back to climate needs in a way, right? And because we have like our input to this world, so yeah, we intake things from from certain we take things from nature, we take things from plant, and we also have our output. So that could be biological output, like the sweat we produce and the feces and all that stuff that we give back to the system. But then like it's gross to talk about in human society, but when we give that output to climate, they actually love it because it's natural fertilizer. So this is a part that can be really essential for us to kind of complete this whole loop of ecosystem, is that like human activity has its like kind of like effect, right? So maybe we can measure just for the sake of simplicity, we're just gonna residue or waste. All right, I'm gonna give a quotation mark because it's only waste for us. It's not really waste for anything else. Waste, food waste, human waste, water waste. So put it here, food waste, water waste, and human waste. Last but not least, human waste. Okay, so, and going back to, and then also what we can give nature is our time. And time equals to maintenance. So because those plants aren't gonna plant themselves, and those plants aren't gonna water themselves, and maintaining a garden, it's really, really incredibly hard. So it takes an incredible amount of time to get things done. That's why it's easier if a bunch of people live in the village, because they can share these time and resources. So part of that also like gets in, I guess, in the way, or maybe not, into us fulfilling our personal needs. So let's say if you're an artist, and if I tell you you gotta move to this eco village right now, and then you do it, and then because you want to be close to nature, but then you realize once you're there you have to weed every single day, you have to water plants for 2 hours, then after that you just barely have any time to work on your art and your craft. And that's basically how society had been for a long time, where people in rural areas are so preoccupied with agriculture and with like being self-sufficient, because being self-sufficient and growing your food is not an easy task, right? And then it's not in this game to say that, oh, we can get robots to outdo that and automate everything. And that's also not the goal of this game. The goal of this game is really to bring awareness to this field and let people know that this can be done, and also advocate that we can grow our own food, and then acknowledge that growing our food is going to be hard, it's going to be challenging, but also acknowledge there's going to be a learning curve and a practice curve, just as anything. Like the more we do it, the better we're going to get at it. Maybe in the very beginning it's going to be hard, but the more we do it, the more people join us on this journey of growing your own things, the more people start sharing resources and methods, the more cool hacks you find, and the better we're going to get at it. So in time there's going to be like level of efficiency. I'm going to just singulate that as another parameter and call it efficiency. So this is kind of like, if you think about these elements that we listed as what do you call it? Like if all these elements are just like variables, right? They change, and all these elements are variables with a certain amount quantity to begin with, right? Like in the very beginning, we know there's going to be on average certain amount of water every day, and then but then there's also the variable of time, a variable of change. So like the elements change based on how it is, but for the sake of the simple simulation, we can just say elements don't change. If this nature terrain is how it is, we're just gonna assume it's just how it is if we don't add things to it, for the sake of the simplicity of this game, but not saying that that's actually how reality works. But then human needs, human can be the factor that actually manifest things and then change things. And then if we can take into account what are some of the elements of change that we add to this like simulation of nature with the variable as time, and time itself would add another layer of complexity into this graph. So if you think about this graph as a one-dimensional graph, this is just like one frame of the time, and then adding the time, it's like adding another dimension, because all these variables will start changing as time start changing. So we do need to also think about monitoring the data. Now this is kind of just like brainstorming and then putting everything that we think about into like words, so that we look at it later and get reminded. And efficiency, it's something that we can kind of like accelerate or like decelerate the amount of time needed for any task. So maybe in the very beginning, and this is something that we can progress because in any game you really want to progress, right? You like in Civilization, there's a technological tree that you follow, and then every new research you do, everything you learn is gonna improve yourself technologically, and then allow yourself to like progress better and produce more and become a more advanced civilization. So in this game we also have to think about the concept of progress, like how much more like concept progress combined with the concept efficiency. So let's say like right now, maybe in the very beginning, one person can plant 20 plants a day or take care of 20 plants a day. And then 5 years later, we discovered automatic irrigation technology, so that the whole village can have like entire places being irrigated with smart monitor control, instead of having 20 people going water each single plant every morning, because that's very time consuming. So like the amount of efficiency is gonna define how we progress. And just wanna show talk about like the civilization tech tree, because I think the civilization tech tree has been kind of like a model for a lot of strategic management, and how do you think about like time and efficiency, and how do you kind of like summarize history in a way, in a digestible term. And civilization is also like, I would strongly recommend this game, and it is very educational in its own way. Like it has so much cultural reference, and it kind of like also it's simulated on like realistic history also in a way. So civilization technology tree. So for the users that, or users, sorry, for the viewers that don't know what we're talking about, we're just gonna go show this tech tree. And basically in this game you get to progress as a civilization, and as you progress you do your research as a civilization, and then you discover new technologies. And all these technology, oh my god, this is so small, all these technologies are based on like realistic kind of like how our world history actually was. So let's say if I can, yeah, this is the bigger one. So we start with the ancient era, where like you start with learning pottery, learning animal husbandry, archery, to discover writing, to discover philosophy, to discover like metal casting, machinery. And then later on we get in to the Renaissance era, where you discover banking, and then you're going to start making a lot of money. So discover chemistry, you're going to start making cannon and all that stuff. And industrial era, where like you discover biology, you can start drilled oil, and then electricity, and then be able to produce a lot more efficiently. And then to the modern era, where we discover plastic, where we can start to wrap things around. And then each of these discovery in the game talk about like actual historical discovery, like when was this actually discovered. So you can actually learn a lot of like historical fact through this game, which made it super strategic and educational at the same time. Until later on we discovered like atomic theory and everything, and to the information era, where you think about like the internet. And the end goal of civilization has always been launching a satellite into or like launching a rocket to the moon. And once you do that, you kind of like finish this game as civilization, like you did it, you're that civilization that went to the moon. So it's a really cool game. It's like definitely like such a cult classic. But if you look at the map of this map, you can just kind of see how much of these technology are related to like war and weaponry, and see how much human have progressed, and all the motivation for us to really innovate and progress has been rooted into this aggression of like cultural war, tribal wars, country wars, and nation wars. And then like, oh, they discovered cannon, no, now we have to invest all of our national treasury so we can discover better cannon, so we can shoot them back. And then they discovered industrialization, that's why they're able to come here and colonize all these other nations. So all these other nations now are forced to do the same thing, so they can finally have their own sovereignty. And it's really sad to think about that. But like there's a reason that we need to learn all of these to know how it works. But as I was thinking about like the Agartha game, and we want to very much follow a very similar concept of doing a strategic management approach, but we don't really want to be thinking about how civilization have progressed based on industrialization and war. We want to think about how civilization could progress based on like unity within human and nature, right? So like there is this whole like other alternative timeline that we haven't even like started looking into until the recent kind of solar punk movement. And these are some of the things that we can explore, and then we will really, really love to explore in designing and crafting this game. And again, it's not something that we can get done within the Forefront residency within this short amount of time, but I would still like to just put the word out there and let you guys know that this is the concept that we want to approach. And after the residency, we probably will spend like a few months regrouping and think about really strategizing how can we really convey these concepts, right? Like what does the technical tree, like I'm gonna write it down here, what does the regenerative, holistic, natural, nature friendly technology tree look like? Like if we want to have like something like the technology tree in civilization, but like make it regenerative and make it like more on the theme of not just humans developing humans for human needs, but also human developing for nature needs. I'm just gonna copy this image and paste it here, and boom, as a beautiful, beautiful reference, but also a great reminder on what are like how our history is formed and what are some of the things that we can change for the better. You know, history is a very great resource for us to learn, but it doesn't mean that we have to be stuck in this loop of repeating our history. It's the first time history where we have all the knowledge that we need, as what Bucky Fuller said, we now as a human species have everything that we need to build really like a regenerative, like long-lasting civilization where peace and prosperity can be achieved, because all the knowledge that we need is out there. We just need to find out where they are, and then the goal of the Agartha game is to be able to at least capture some of that knowledge and that way of holistic thinking, and then bring that to this game. And it's the more I talk about it, the more I realize just how like ambitious this sounds and how just challenging it will be to create something like that. But it doesn't mean that we should stop trying, and it doesn't mean that we should settle for anything less. So I just want to take a break here. Oh my god, it's already 40 minutes. I still want to do a technical demo. Oh, okay. It's another game. Great metrics equals to assholeness. How to measure? I know, right? If we can measure the amount of assholeness everyone has, that would be kind of a cool game. Like it could be a fun kind of casual mobile game on asshole measurement. And I had this idea yesterday when I couldn't sleep. A game called like Forget Your Ex, and it could be ex roommate, it could be ex boyfriend girlfriend, or it could be ex partner, or it could be ex anything. And then it's just like a simulation game on like emotional trauma and all that stuff. But anyways, digress. A lot of these things about reality, if you reduce it and like simulate it in a game, it can be quite funny sometimes, because kind of like as a reflection on how reality looks. And we have 15 minutes now. Let's see how much we can get done. If not, we can at least walk through the concept that we wanted to go through. So going over all of these like kind of more elemental concept, and realizing that okay, like we don't really have all that time to make that for the residency, I started thinking about what are some of the things that we do make for residency. Well, like we already made like a planting mechanism where you can walk around and plant things, but we also want to have like a mechanism where you can look around and see things. And I had them all bundled in one menu, and I realized that it doesn't work, because if you think about it, we only really have one screen, right? Like, and then that's kind of another point I want to talk about, is the UI UX element of game development, because you only have one screen and very limited amount of space, and you don't want to squeeze all your buttons and all the interactions into one screen, because you want people to be able to actually play this game and not be overwhelmed by the amount of details and crazy buttons and where do I press this to do what. So a bad UI, a bad UX can really just kill the whole experience. It's the same for game, for website, for anything. You really want the user to feel really intuitive when they pick up this thing. So I've been feeling really stressed thinking about how do you incorporate really great UI into like this whole system that we're trying to approach. And I realized that, you know, like that's also getting getting kind of like too ahead of myself in terms of this residency. So bringing it back down to the goal that we're trying to achieve here. So we have a view, like we want to view things, we want to look at things and get the data, and then we want to plant things, and then that's like two different interactions. Like, do you really want to be viewing things and planting things at the same time? Maybe that could be cool, but that also would just make things very complex, because you can be like, okay, what am I doing? Like, where do I click? So for the sake of simplicity, I decided to separate these into two different buttons where you view things, and you click one button to view things, you click another button to pick plants and plant things. And that's kind of what I was working on right before the stream started. And let's see which progress are we at. So I added these two buttons, even though I haven't added any interactions. And basically right now, default mode is viewing things. And I added this background just so you know that it's in this mode. But if you click on this plant button, oh yeah, I think that's what I needed to add. I was changing things. Okay, so in the script, let me just move this around. So in the script, I have in the menu controller, we have created a menu status enum, which is a custom kind of status, or a status or any category kind of game object. No, it's not a game. It's a variable. So in this menu status variable, we have two things. We have planting and viewing menu. So like the whole reason that I'm creating like this instead of using it as a boolean, which is what I was doing before, and it got really confusing, is that in the future, if I want to add another mode, let's say watering mode, or like walking mode, you can kind of actually a walking mode would be really helpful. You can kind of just use the same variable, and then now we just know there are all these modes, and we can only be in one mode at each time. So like when we're in planting mode, we do these things. When we're in viewing mode, we do that things. When we're in walking mode, we do these things. So, and then it's gonna help with the logic and make it a lot better. So current status is like another variable that's kind of telling us what's the current, like it stores the information on what are we currently doing. And the default current status is gonna be set as the viewing mode. So by default, you're looking at things. And when you click on this button, ideally this button, which is what I was working on, and you want to kind of show food menu, and you want to kind of set the status to like the planting status. So that would be the show food menu in function, I think. So once you show food menu, it means that now you're planting. And then you will click on that again to flip this, to flip the food menu. Maybe we should call this toggle food menu. So like once you click on this button, you kind of just like switch to the food menu, and then once you click on this button, it should switch to the viewing menu. Well, actually, then it's not toggle, it's still show food menu. Okay. New name, and set to planting here. Set to planting. And then it's food menu on. We're gonna just set this to true, and status is, we're gonna set it to menu status planting. And we're gonna do another very similar set to viewing function where like, and is food menu. I don't know why I need this boolean. I probably don't. Set status, menu status, viewing, and okay. So set to planting, set to viewing. So now let us see. So now we're just gonna click on these two different things, and then they will set to two different things. And go find my UI. So I have this button that I want to click, and I want to click on the script that's attached here, UI, and then we're gonna call it set to planting. And then this UI right here, we're gonna same oops, this button, I made this camera little icon, and we're gonna call it view. And as you might know from the earlier session, before we planned to have these as like different energy elements. And right now I realize, okay, maybe I don't even have time to do that. So let's make that even simpler. And UI, menu controller, and set to viewing. This is viewing, okay. So now when we press on these two buttons, it should toggle the view. And when we press on this button, we should just like turn on off this entire content menu. So we can just press on this menu button to turn on and off this content menu, because sometimes maybe we just don't want to have anything and walk around, right? So cancel. So we are gonna make a toggle content menu. As you see, I've created a lot of functions and I've deleted a lot of them because I keep thinking about how do I do a better job categorizing these logic. Toggle content. And in this toggle content, we're just gonna do one thing. This content menu. I think content menu needs to be plugged in, which I did before. Yeah, it's right here. Enable that. And content menu enabled, this boolean, turn it on. So content menu is naturally maybe not enabled, because maybe by default you just don't really want to, or like we can set content, set content, show content, and then maybe content menu is just by default you don't want to show any content. So toggle, so show content, toggle content. What? Oh, it's called show content or toggle content? Oh, yeah, sorry. Toggle content. I'm gonna put a boolean here. And we're gonna change this to toggle content. So by default, we don't really want to have any content. And let's see if toggle content should have a boolean here, or maybe no. Sorry. Just trying to think faster because we don't have that much time. So okay, we want the content to be default false. So we're gonna do, and toggle content should really be every time we call this function, it flips the content, right? So like maybe by default we just don't really call that. We say content menu enabled is false, which is already claimed, and then what we need to do is just content menu set active as false. So in default, content menu is disabled, the variable is false, and then every time we toggle content, we flip this boolean, so content menu enabled equals to its opposite. So every time you click on that, so if it's enabled, you disable it. If it's disabled, enable it, and then content menu set active to content menu enabled to this variable. So this variable flips every time, and then you also set your object to be active and is inactive every time when it's flipped. And this is what the toggle content button does. So by default, it should be content menu should just be like disabled. And if you want to know what content menu is, it is this thing that we were talking about. Okay, give me 1 second. Okay, on UI content menu, we're gonna put this in, and just for us to know that we're actually using this content menu, I am gonna put this background in its base level, in its first child level, so that whenever content menu on, you will see this white background and you know that we're actually viewing the content. So going to the UI now, just refreshing our mind, whenever the top bar has this menu button, whenever we have this menu button, and we're gonna call the UI and then kind of like just menu controller show toggle content, and then we're gonna just like toggle it on and off. And also there's this line of code that I wrote earlier that I wanna bring it back. It's this one. So this is basically menu button has like its child object. I'm gonna just put this image to zero transparency. Menu button has like these two child objects. One of them should be this circle. It should be white. Okay. 1, 1, 1. And the other one should be this cross. So it has like an on and off. Man, the circle is so much bigger than the cross. Okay. Now it's the same. And basically what we want is that if menu is turned on, we show the cross. Menu is turned off, we show the on. So that like to indicate that the menu is on and off. So we have these two very hard-coded script that we are gonna bring in, not here. Wait, what? This is a content display controller. I'm just gonna put it here. This, oh, okay. This is menu controller, sorry. So this is the script to basically flip that, and we're gonna put that into the toggle content part. And then so that transform get child 1, which means it's the first child. First child is the on button. So the on button should be active when it's off, right? So like it should be. So if content menu is not enabled, we want people to know to enable it by showing the on button. And then same logic, if the content menu is enabled, we want to showcase the off button. It's like this flipping. I hate this, but like you have to do this, even though like it seems to be like really simple. But as you're thinking about it, sometimes if you get into these logic loops. So hopefully that was the right thing to do. And now we can try to call toggle content on this menu button, which was already do. So every time you click on this, it's gonna toggle the content, and every time you click on this food, it's gonna be set to planting. Click to view, it's gonna set to viewing, and then we're gonna play. See if there's any additional comment. Oh, good, we're doing great. Okay, let me give computer some time to react. So by default, everything is disabled, which is really awesome. And you walk around, you don't see anything, but if you click this, now you have this menu, and then you click around, you can start to see elements. If you go into the planting mode, which is my favorite mode, you click on lettuce, and you will be able to plant lettuce, yes! And now we can't really see because this thing is in the middle, which doesn't really make sense. Just turn it off. And okay, we have 1 minute left. I would love to do a bit more of the technical stuff, but I can also probably more comfortably leave that off live stream after this. And but anyways, tomorrow we are gonna do a session. Sorry, before I get into finalizing this, let me just put this one thing away so I don't forget. Put the background into the item info session. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so we're pretty close. I just want to do like another demonstration of what I worked on. We only planted corn, but this session I've kind of connected each plant into each button. So now we're actually, spoiler alert, we're actually, okay, click on this. Spoiler, we need to select plant. Oh wait, wrong button. And then you can click lettuce, carrots, plant corn, and I probably spent more time figuring out how to these things to randomize a bit. Now they look exactly the same. They look like you can plan a whole matrix of them. Second, so we want to give them a randomized rotation, randomized scale, and everything. And secondly, you probably them to probably animation, right? Because they that would look really nice. Even though in the actual game, if we planting will probably take a lot of time for it to actually grow, so we need to make different stuff to each plant. So, but in this like we can plant this mushroom. Very satisfying. And you can plant into view mode, and then still right now you can the ground, but what we can do real quick after the session, what I'm gonna work on is you can view at different elements. Like you can look at the lettuce and it will tell you like, you know, like what is is and what are some of the, and actually made a mock-up of encyclopedia, which is somewhere to be found here. So this item interface, I exported that somewhere. Item interface where like you will be able to kind of look at any plant and then know what it needs to grow. These are the nutrition value it provides, and then like this can not only live in Unity, but it can have like a separate web interface where any download these data and anyone can go and put these 3D meshes into their game, because and then we can kind of frame this as metaverse compatible. So these are some of the plans that we will talk more about in the next session. And next session will be tomorrow, same time at 1 p.m. And we will be not doing any more technical demo because all the technical stuff will be done by then, but we'll do a more deep dive into like the Agartha DAO and the Agartha project, and then how we're gonna, hopefully we might launch that on the Juicebox platform by then. If not, probably we'll launch it in a few days. But what is the whole Agartha project beyond just the game? What's the timeline and the roadmap for this game? What's the timeline roadmap for the project? How's the DAO's gonna, what's the goal for the DAO to be able to get a bunch of people kind of to work on more mission aligned project towards the regenerative future? And what are some exciting partners we have? Because in the past few weeks, I've been like kind of reaching out to people that I know, or getting to know new people through the strange web of internet and the DAO space, and found out people that really want to collaborate together on the same initiative. So the next session will be super exciting. It will be kind of a summary of what we've achieved through this whole residency and what's the plan beyond. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now, and thank you all for tuning into the session, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.